Hello and welcome to Conversations With, our monthly series of informal and enlightening conversations between the leading-edge teacher and author, Jim Self, and some of today's most progressive and connected teachers, channels, and authors. Now, here's our host, Jim Self.
Intention and attention are more potent than ever before because the consciousness and the applications are now much more available to us and becoming much more conscious to each one of us. When properly understood, clearly focused intention allows for more dynamic creation to occur almost instantaneously today. As a pioneer of the original intention experiments, Bill Tiller, a professor emeritus at Stanford University, has proven the focused intention has the power to transform the pH balance of water over thousands of miles. And now, in collaboration with pediatric speech-language pathologist Suzy Miller, their Autism Intention Experiment is proving that focused intention can create meaningful alterations in the behavior of children diagnosed with autism. Bill and I are going to talk today about his 40 years of research in psychoenergetics and the power of intention to influence change. So why don't you start a little bit and talk about how you got here? I mean, as a scientific professor focused in material sciences and physics, how did you get to consciousness and intention?
Fortunately, I received some money from a philanthropist in 1997 for a 3-year program, and I decided to put that money to work to seriously study the Descartes assumption of 1600. Descartes' assumption, which was really valuable at the time, it was that no human qualities of consciousness, intention, emotion, mind, or spirit could significantly influence a well-designed target experiment in physical reality.
So this was effectively the beginning of science.
Yes, exactly. And it was really a century after the beginning, after the Copernican revolution, all that stuff that involved the beginning of Newton's work and Kepler and, like a senior moment.
Galileo.
Galileo was what I was looking for. And in essence, it was necessary for him to make this assumption because it allowed you to discriminate between religion and science. Now, there's no way of knowing whether it was true or not, but it was at that time, but it was a useful thing. And the dilemma in today's world is that intention has been unconsciously held by orthodox science and orthodox medicine for the last 400 years. It still took another 100 years after the Descartes assumption before people really were able to make the transition from the theocratic mindset that they had grown used to. So since in all of that time, the last 400 years, this assumption had never been tested, and it was dominant in the conduct of orthodox science. So I decided to test it. I mean, basically, orthodox science decided that everything had to be internally self-consistent within a reference frame of distance time only in the study of nature. And that was tough because even from the mid-1800s, there had been a lot of very good work by people studying what in those days would be called parapsychology.
Sure.
And basically, the orthodox science community buried all of that because the data didn't fit their distance-time-only reference frame. So it became tough. I mean, orthodox science has done great work, and the reason that I decided to take this on was I felt that the other work was more important for humanity, that although the Orthodox science community is still doing very interesting work, I don't believe it is helping humankind develop themselves in the way I think they are meant to be developed. And it doesn't really provide the foundation needed for, I think, the new epoch that is underway. It started. It's not fully blown yet, but it's already started. And so I did...
Let me put this in perspective for a minute.
Yep.
So effectively, what Descartes did is he looked at how there was lots of extraneous influence, religion, politics, and when you can remove the extraneous influence, you can come up with a pure scientific experience that basically has hypothesis and then can prove the thesis.
Exactly.
But in the process of doing that, what he effectively has done is created a new religion that eliminates all other possibilities as a contribution to finding truth.
Yes, and the limitation was that distance time only as a reference frame, which, of course, it was a great step forward from the theocratic view. It is a very limiting perspective of nature. Nature is broadcasting on many, many bands, not just the one that is distance time only. Well, and of course it's not distance time. The only part is what becomes difficult. Distance time is an important piece in the manifold expression of nature. And we are now at a turning point to go and take the next step into a larger level of reality than just distance time. And distance time, there are many serious pieces of work that are problems that come from this distance time only perspective. And all of them need to be recognized and need to be corrected. And that's really what the work is about, is really dealing with these things, recognizing where they have contributed and recognizing where they are a serious limitation in today's world.
Sure. And so you've stepped into this space by adding really kind of one of the most fundamental building blocks of creation, intention and attention.
And the issue is that attention, of course, is always been with us. We have expanded the today's Orthodox reference frame to include both human intention as a significant experimental variable and human consciousness as a significant experimental variable. Yes. And this is going to change the future dramatically.
And the work you're doing now is beginning to have scientific documented results that can be peer-reviewed if can be objective.
If it turns out that in the last 15 years we have shown that it's possible to change the properties of a material, change the alkaline-acidic balance of water, pH, up one or more pH units or down one or more pH units from the same kind of water with no chemical additions. In the Orthodox community, that can be done, but only with chemical additions.
Right.
So in our case, there's no new chemistry added other than intention.
So if I look at your results as a scientist, I have to either deny them as crazy or shift my own belief system.
That is true, exactly. And they would prefer at this point to call it crazy because, when you work with something in a belief system for such a long time, it's very difficult to shift or easily shift to another belief system, to accept data that you've denied for centuries. So it's a slow process, and it's unfortunate it is the way it is, but the data will eventually cause the general public to force the government to cause these very excellent scientists to get off the pot and get outside the box and look at what else is there. And I think that's going to happen in a very important and interesting way. Basically, we've had back in June the experience of, again, another senior moment, but basically the Higgs boson work that seems to have come to fruition after the last 40 years, and it was proposed a long time ago, but that particular entity has been proposed to give mass to all the particles that we know about in nature, at least in the distance time only reference frame. And that brings forth a kind of conclusion of the standard model of orthodox science, which in turn and if that includes the Big Bang, but it deals with electromagnetic energy. And the thing we have to recognize is that all of our instruments, pretty much all of our instruments, are based on electromagnetic energy, which have an upper limit of the velocity of electromagnetic light in vacuum. And our work seems to be indicating that as you go into the vacuum and beyond the physical vacuum into the higher dimensional aspects, all of these domains, the stuff of these domains, is superluminal. A superluminal means faster than electromagnetic light. And electromagnetic light is all subluminal, which is slower than the velocity of electromagnetic light. This is 3 times 10 to the 10th centimeters per second velocity. So what the Orthodox community are going to find as they move forward, they will find that although the faster-than-light domain, our work has shown that it is accessible and available to do new and interesting things, they will have no tools to do those things because the electromagnetic tools all go slower than the velocity of light. And the Big Bang aspect looks at the physical vacuum as being empty because, of course, we know that all our instruments, they look at the physical vacuum and their physical vacuum is transparent to the movement of electromagnetic energy. And it turns out that at all frequencies of electromagnetic energy, they go at the same constant velocity, which, and in our own eyesight, the vacuum looks transparent. So it's understandable to conclude that it's empty. However, there has been work by John Wheeler, who's passed now, but a very great astrophysicist, and he said that for quantum mechanics and relativity theory to be internally self-consistent, the vacuum had to have a latent energy density of 10 to the power 94 grams equivalent of electromagnetic mass. Well, that's huge.
So that's something bigger than what is known.
That is bigger in the following way. If you take the cosmos as we know it, it's sort of a sphere of radius 15 billion light years, and you multiply it by the average electromagnetic mass density in stars and planets and cosmic dust. And that astronomers give us a number for that. So if we multiply those two together, we have an idea what kind of energy content is available in our physical cosmos. On the other hand, if you take a single hydrogen atom and you take the volume of it, the hydrogen atom has one proton as the nucleus and has one electron orbiting around it. But it's mostly empty space. If you take that incredibly small volume of empty space and you multiply it by 10 to the 94 grams equivalent per cc, then you find that that stuff within the vacuum stuff of the volume of a single hydrogen atom is 1 trillion times larger then all of the mass in all of the stars and all of the planets and all the cosmic dust in our cosmos of radius 15 billion light years.
Wow.
Interesting. Really interesting. Okay? Let me give you another
there's more
piece.
going on.
Another piece comes when Dirac did his work in the mid-20s to find out where an electron comes from. He said it comes from an energy sea, a negative energy sea in the physical vacuum. Now, he said the way this comes about is an incoming photon interacts with the stuff of the physical vacuum and pumps out an electron into a higher energy state beyond a band gap of energy, but it leaves behind a hole in this stuff. And that hole became the antimatter. It was defined as that, was experimentally discovered in the 30s. We now have antimatter particles for every other particle that has been discovered by orthodox science. And the point I want to make is there would not be antimatter if the physical vacuum was empty.
Sure.
And then there are other things that show that it is not, the physical vacuum is not empty. And those calculations tend to show that there is stuff there, but it's going faster than the velocity of light. And so it does not interact with things going slower than the velocity of light. And that's why you can deduce that, this thing is empty because it's not interacting with things. Well, it can't interact with it because it's going faster than light. Now, from our work, we have created what I think is a higher dimensional substance which can go both slower than light and faster than light and can be a coupler between these two domains. And when you have the coupler, now you can begin to see the interaction. And thus you can begin to make measurements on things that appear to be going faster than light.
Okay, so take that into the form of your experiment.
All right. We learned eventually after, say, the initial 10 years of research in this area, we learned how to broadcast. We realized that we were dealing with what I call subtle energies. They are energies different than those found from the four fundamental forces in orthodox science. Those are gravity, electromagnetism, the short-range nuclear force, and the long-range nuclear force. So subtle energies, I proposed and published a short paper on that maybe 20 years ago. These are all the other energies functioning in nature beyond those that are in our orthodox toolbox. So I did 4 experiments to prove or disprove the Descartes assumption. 2 of them had to do with pH. One with pH going up, one with pH going down. I had learned how to imprint an intention into a little electronic box that you could put together from the kinds of things you would get at Radio Shack in the 1950s.
Talk about that a little bit. So how did you do that? How do you put a thought into an electrical box?
Okay. It turns out someone else had created this kind of box, and I experimented with it. And I used 4 people who were long-time expert meditators. At this point, my wife and I have been meditators for almost 50 years. The 2 other people had been meditators at the time of those experiments also for 30 to 40 years. And so we would go into, well, first of all, we'd set up this black box on a tabletop. We'd plug it into an electrical plug. The electromagnetic radiation coming out of it was less than 1/1,000,000th of a watt. So the place where we got the devices indicated from their studies. And we would then go into a deep meditative state. First, we would cohere ourselves as a group of 4. And we would have the feeling of connectedness also to a deep level of a higher dimensional domain of reality, and that we would connect with these unseeing entities as well, these beings. I thought of them as my higher dimensional colleagues. And so we jointly would cohere, and I would then read the imprint statement that I'd created for the specific intention, and then we would hold that intention for maybe a half an hour. Okay. And when things felt cooked at that level of reality, and we thought of it as a sacred space, and we were trying to co-create in that sacred space, I would say, so be it, thy will be done. And tentatively come out of meditation and then give a short intention to seal the prime directive into the device so that it didn't leak away. We later found it was interesting. Once we'd imprinted the device, we call it an intention host device, an imprinted intention host device. I took an imprinted device and took an unimprinted one, separated them by about 100 meters, turned them both off electrically, and just waited to see if anything happened. And you would expect, of course, nothing would happen because the electric power is off in both systems. But within 3 to 5 days, the imprint had been transferred from the imprinted device to the unimprinted device. And yet there was no electrical connection. I first thought, heavens, I'll not be able to do any experiments because I'm losing the control. But then I realized, oh, wait a minute, these devices are off, so there's really at least one more information channel in nature through which information can pass. Yes. And then I found that if I stored the device in a Faraday cage that was grounded and wrapped the device itself in aluminum foil and put it in the Faraday cage, it could keep it alive. The imprint intention could be kept alive for maybe up to 6 months. So it meant that I could do experiments and I could ship a device to other people so they could do experiments, etc. So then we did the 2 pH experiments. The third experiment was to condition a space wherein this kind of creativity could take place. And then I took a liver enzyme, alkaline phosphatase, and just put it in that space for 30 minutes, first of all, before that, measuring its chemical activity, put it in the intention statement in that case was to increase the chemical activity by exposure to a conditioned space. And then, so it was in there for 30 minutes, took it out and experimentally measured it, and indeed the chemical activity had been increased by almost 30%, and the p-value, that is the probability that it happened by random chance, was less than one chance in 1,000, which is really robust experimental results. The fourth experiment was to take a living system, fruit fly larvae, and to put them in an agar solution, on the top of that solution so that they had food. We were conditioning the space continually through the lifetime of the fruit fly larva. The goal was to increase the ATP to ADP, that is the energy storage molecule for the fruit fly larva. It has 3 phosphorus atoms, whereas the chemical precursor had only 2 phosphorus atoms, and so our intention was to add a 3rd phosphorus atom to this ADP, and we found that we were able to do that to the amount of 10 to 15%, again with p-values better than 0.001, and we thought that would make the fruit fly larva become more physically fit and therefore have a shorter larval development time to the adult fly stage. And in fact, we found that we were able to reduce the larval development time to the adult fly stage by pretty close to 25%, with p-values better than 0.001. So those four experiments were so remarkable, they proved unequivocally that in today's world, at least, the Descartes assumption is no longer holds.
So the assumption is Descartes is correct in some aspect of it, but when you begin to inject another aspect of, in this case, consciousness and intention, you alter the foundation of the experiment.
The ball game is definitely changed. And whether the Descartes experiment held in the old days or not, we'll never know. But at least in today's world, it does not hold. But it is still stuck in the subconscious of the Orthodox community, the medical community, in universities around the world, and in the supporters.
What I know in all of the Mastering Alchemy work is that the barriers, some people call them the veils between consciousness, but as this third-dimensional electromagnetic field that we've been exposed to forever has changed. We've moved out of that field. That's my work, my awareness.
No, I quite agree. I mean, the other fields were always there, but they could not be accessed from distance time.
Right. So one of the really exciting things about what you're doing in terms of kind of scientifically proving it and moving the direction of science to begin to include a spiritual alignment, which will happen very soon as this unfolds, and a lot of it is directly related to what kind of you're doing. But the scientific community in this case, just like the political community, the religious community, are usually the last ones to go. They're the leader, and they have to now catch up to who they're leading. And
I think that's exactly the case.
Yeah, but the public is, and people who are listening, understand this in very clear ways because they're not encumbered by the prove it and the lines of restriction that third dimensional reality has happened. And I think you're going to begin to see some really tremendous scientific breakthroughs that clearly have a component of something, the scientists would say, we can't prove it or define it, I don't know even where to look for it, but here's my results.
If you enjoyed this highlight from Conversations With, join Jim Self live on the Awakening Zone Network. That's awakeningzone.com. If you're looking for free tools for your personal and spiritual growth, if you want to be who you came here to be, visit masteringalchemy.com, where you can learn more about Jim, his work, and future guests. Our theme song is Hands of Love by Barry Goldstein. May you experience laughter and grace on your journey home.